What happened next redefined Ambassador Kethra's understanding of modern warfare. The human ships didn't charge straight at the Korthek formation like she expected. Instead, they seemed to vanish from the tactical display for several crucial seconds. Vex frantically worked his controls, trying to re-establish sensor contact. Ambassador, I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference. The humans are deploying some kind of sensor dampening field across the entire engagement zone. I can barely track their positions. Through the static-filled display, Kethra could make out ghostly silhouettes moving at impossible speeds, weaving between the Korthak heavy cruisers like predators stalking prey. The raiders had formed their traditional defensive sphere, a formation that had served them well against conventional forces. Overlapping shield coverage, concentrated firepower, and the ability to support any ship that came under heavy attack. It was a solid defensive strategy against any known military doctrine. But humans, apparently, didn't fight according to known doctrine. The first indication that something was wrong came from the Korthak communications chatter, which Vex was monitoring on secondary channels. Command ship Blood Drinker, this is Skull Crusher. I'm reading multiple targeting locks, but I can't identify the source. These humans have some kind of stealth technology that's interfering with our sensors. All ships maintain formation. They're trying to confuse us. Fire on any target that presents itself. But there were no targets presenting themselves. The human ships had become ghosts in the electromagnetic soup they had created, visible only as brief sensor contacts that appeared and disappeared faster than the Korthak targeting systems could track. Then the first human ship materialized out of the interference, directly above the Korthak formation. The 10 Vengeance dropped out of whatever stealth field it had been using and unleashed a barrage of weapons fire that defied everything Kethra knew about ship-to-ship combat. Instead of the traditional energy beam weapons favored by most galactic navies, the humans were using what appeared to be solid projectile weapons firing at a significant percentage of light speed. The impact on the nearest Korthak cruiser, the Painbringer, was devastating. The kinetic projectiles tore through the raiders' shields like they weren't there, punching massive holes in the hull and sending debris spinning into space. But what made the attack truly terrifying was its precision. Every shot hit a critical system. Weapons arrays, shield generators, engine housing, life support systems. The Painbringer didn't explode in a dramatic fireball. It simply stopped working as a functional warship in the span of 15 seconds. Impossible, Vex whispered. No targeting system is that accurate during high-speed combat. Before the Kortheks could respond to the attack on the Painbringer, 2 more human ships materialized on opposite sides of their formation. The 10 Retribution and the 10 Reckoning opened fire simultaneously, their weapons coordinated with mechanical precision. Each ship targeted a different Korthak vessel, and each attack was surgically precise. The Korthak commander, Captain Vextor of the Blood Drinker, was broadcasting increasingly frantic orders to his fleet. All ships, scatter formation. They're picking us off one by one. Random evasion patterns, maximum burn on all engines. But even as the Korthak ships attempted to break formation and flee, the human vessels were already moving to intercept. What became clear to Kethra, watching from the relative safety of the Harmony's voice, was that the humans weren't just reacting to Korthak movements. They were anticipating them. Pilot Second Vex, are you recording this engagement? Yes, Ambassador. Though I'm not sure anyone will believe the recordings. A third wave of human ships emerged from the electromagnetic interference. But instead of engaging the scattered Korthak vessels, they moved to positions that at first seemed random. Only when the Korthak ships attempted to flee toward the edge of the system did their purpose become clear. Every escape route had been cut off. The humans had predicted not only where the raiders would try to run, but had positioned their ships to intercept them before they even began their retreat. Captain, Vextor's voice crackled over the communications channel, no longer carrying its earlier confidence. Human fleet? This is Captain Vextor of the Korthak Syndicate. We are prepared to negotiate terms for the release of the civilian transport. State your demands. Admiral Chung's response was immediate and delivered with the same calm professionalism he had maintained throughout the engagement. Captain Vextor, there will be no negotiations. You initiated piracy operations against civilian targets. You threatened the lives of 300 innocent beings. The time for talk ended when you fired your first shot? But surely there must be some arrangement we can reach. The Korthik Syndicate has resources, wealth beyond imagination. We can offer compensation, territory, even military support for your future operations. The silence that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds. When Admiral Chun spoke again, his voice carried a coldness that made Kethra's skin crawl. Captain, you seem to be operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't even a battle in any traditional sense. This is an extermination. As if summoned by his words, the remaining 11 human ships materialized out of the interference field simultaneously, surrounding the scattered Korthik vessels in a perfect sphere. What followed wasn't combat. It was a demonstration of technological and tactical superiority so overwhelming that it bordered on the surreal. Each human ship engaged multiple Korthik vessels at once, their weapons firing with computerized precision. But they weren't trying to destroy the raider ships quickly. Instead, they systematically disabled every major system while keeping the vessels intact and the crews alive. Engines were destroyed, but not the life support systems. Weapons were obliterated, but not the emergency power generators. Communications arrays were reduced to scrap metal, but not the emergency beacons that would allow rescue operations to locate survivors. Kethra watched in fascination as the human fleet demonstrated a level of fire control that shouldn't have been possible. They were performing surgery with weapons designed for destruction, neutralizing 12 heavily armed warships without killing a single crew member. Ambassador, Vex called out, his voice filled with awe. I'm receiving a transmission from Captain Zix-9. The Prosperity's Dream reports that all attacks have ceased. They're requesting permission to begin rescue operations for their own injured. Grant them permission, and advise them to maintain safe distance from the engagement zone until the human fleet signals all clear. As the last Korthik weapon fell silent, Admiral Chun's voice echoed across the system on an open broadcast frequency. All vessels in the Epsilon 7 system. This is Admiral Marcus Chun. The piracy threat has been neutralized. The civilian transport Prosperity's Dream is cleared for rescue operations. Korthik survivors will be taken into custody and transported to the nearest judicial facility for processing according to Galactic Maritime law. But it was what came next that truly demonstrated the thoroughness of human military doctrine. Additionally, all Korthak vessels and equipment will be impounded as evidence and as compensation for the damages inflicted upon civilian shipping in this sector. The coordinates of this engagement are being transmitted to the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority, along with complete tactical recordings and biometric scans of all participants. Kethra felt her secondary heart skip a beat. The humans weren't just eliminating the immediate threat. They were creating a permanent record that would ensure every member of this particular raider group could be identified and prosecuted if they were ever captured in the future. More importantly, they were sending a message to every other pirate organization operating in this sector of space, the 10. Retribution moved closer to the Harmony's voice, and Admiral Chen's image appeared on their main screen once again. This time, however, his expression had softened slightly. Ambassador Kethra of the Valdorian High Council, this is Admiral Chun. We've completed our primary mission objectives. Do you require any assistance with rescue and recovery operations? Kethra found herself struggling to find words. She had just witnessed 12 heavy cruisers neutralized by 14 human ships in less than 47 minutes, with 0 casualties among the attackers and minimal casualties among the defenders. The precision and coordination required for such an operation was beyond anything in her experience. Admiral Chun, on behalf of the Valdorian High Council and the 300 civilians aboard the Prosperity's Dream, I offer our sincere gratitude. Your intervention prevented a tragedy of enormous proportions. Just doing our job, Ambassador. The protection of civilian shipping lanes is a responsibility we take seriously. Vex looked up from his communications console with an expression of confusion. Ambassador, I'm receiving priority transmissions from 14 different military commands, all requesting detailed briefings on the human engagement protocols we just witnessed. It seems word of this engagement is spreading rapidly through military intelligence networks. Kethra wasn't surprised. What they had just witnessed would revolutionize tactical doctrine throughout the galaxy. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made conventional military strategies obsolete. Their speed, precision. The emergency broadcast cut through the galactic communication network like a blade through silk, its desperate tone unmistakable even through the universal translator's mechanical voice. Ambassador Kethra of the Valdordan High Council stood frozen at her workstation aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice, her forearms trembling as the message repeated for the third time. This is Captain Zix-9 of the merchant vessel, Prosperity's Dream. We are under attack by Korthek raiders in the Epsilon 7 system. Our shields are failing. We have 300 civilians aboard, including younglings. Please, anyone who receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance. We cannot hold them off much longer. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Kethra's communications officer, a young Vexian named Pilot Second Vex, looked up from his station with wide, fearful eyes. Ambassador, the Korthek Syndicate has 12 heavy cruisers in that system. The Prosperity's Dream is a civilian transport with minimal defensive capabilities. They don't stand a chance. Kethra's upper arms gestured dismissively while her lower arms worked frantically at her console, sending priority messages to every Valdorian fleet in range. Get me Admiral Mortith immediately. And send word to the Centaurian Defense Force, the Altarian Peacekeepers, anyone with enough firepower to— Ambassador, Vex interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've already sent requests to 14 different military commands. The closest response fleet is 47 hours away. The Kortheks will have finished their raid and disappeared into the void long before anyone arrives. The weight of helplessness settled over the bridge like a suffocating blanket. 300 innocent lives, including children, were about to be lost to the galaxy's most ruthless pirates. And the so-called civilized species could do nothing but watch from a distance. Then Vex's console chimed with an incoming transmission. His expression shifted from despair to confusion, then to something approaching terror. Ambassador, we're receiving a response to our distress relay. It's from the human expeditionary fleet. Every being on the bridge turned to stare at the young communications officer. Kethra felt her secondary heart skip a beat. Humans, the Deathworlders. The species that had emerged from a planet so hostile that most galactic civilizations classified it as uninhabitable. The ones who had somehow survived and thrived in conditions that would kill most spacefaring races within hours. Put it through, Kethra said. Her voice steadier than she felt, the main screen flickered to life, revealing the face of a human male. Unlike the polished, diplomatic appearances of most species representatives, this one looked like he had been carved from stone and tempered by fire. His skin bore the weathered lines of someone who had seen combat, and his pale blue eyes held an intensity that made Kethra's defensive instincts flare. This is Admiral Marcus Chun of the 10 Retribution. We received your relay about the Korthek attack in Epsilon 7. We're currently 8 hours out and closing fast. Kethra found her voice. Admiral Chung, we appreciate your willingness to respond, but 18 hours may still be too late. And forgive my directness, but what size force do you have available? The Korthaks have at least 12 heavy cruisers. Something that might have been a smile crossed the human's face, but it held no warmth. Ambassador, I'm commanding the 5th Expeditionary Battle Group. We have 14 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts and my flagship. As for being too late. He paused, and Kethra could hear activity in the background of his transmission. We've been monitoring Korthek movements in this sector for weeks. They've been hitting civilian targets and disappearing before anyone could respond. Today, that ends. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Vex was the first to speak, his voice trembling. Ambassador, our intelligence reports on human military capabilities are limited. Most species avoid direct engagement with them. But 14 ships against 12 Korthak heavy cruisers? The numbers don't look favorable. Kethra accessed her personal files, pulling up what little information the Valdorian Intelligence Division had managed to gather about human military doctrine. What she found made her secondary hearts race even faster. Humans didn't just come from a death world. They had turned warfare into an art form born from millions of years of survival on a planet that actively tried to kill them. While other species had developed technology to overcome their environments, humans had developed technology to overcome their enemies. Their weapons were designed not just to win battles, but to ensure their opponents never posed a threat again. The file contained fragmentary reports from the border wars, where human forces had ended a three-way conflict between the Zephyrian Empire, the Hektan Alliance, and the Morphic Collective, not through diplomacy or negotiation, but by systematically dismantling all three military forces in a campaign that lasted exactly 72 days. The human approach had been so efficient and so thoroughly devastating that all three empires had immediately sued for peace and had maintained peaceful relations ever since. Pilot Second Vex. Compile everything we have on human military engagement protocols. I want to know what we're about to witness. As Vex worked, Kethra's mind raced through the implications. The galaxy's major powers had spent decades building elaborate diplomatic frameworks to contain conflicts, establishing rules of engagement that minimized casualties and preserved infrastructure. They fought wars like elaborate games with complex rules and acceptable losses calculated to the decimal point. Humans, according to the few reports available, fought wars like they were still trying to survive on their death world. They identified threats and eliminated them with a thoroughness that bordered on the terrifying. Their soldiers didn't just train for combat. They trained for every possible scenario that could occur during combat, including scenarios that other species considered impossible or unethical to prepare for. The emergency broadcast from Captain Zix-9 continued to repeat every 15 minutes, each transmission growing more desperate. The Korthaks were toying with their prey, extending the chase to maximize the terror of their victims. It was a common raider tactic, designed to break the spirit of potential resistance and make the eventual boarding action easier. Kethra found herself wondering if the Korthaks had any idea what was coming for them. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice was not equipped for combat, but Kethra ordered them to maintain course toward the Epsilon 7 system. If nothing else, they could provide rescue and recovery services for any survivors. Then, with 6 hours remaining until the human fleet's projected arrival, something changed in Captain Zix-9's transmissions. This is Captain Zix-9. The Korthaks have stopped their attack pattern. They're pulling back to a defensive formation. Something has them spooked. We're reading multiple sensor contacts at the edge of the system, moving fast. Very fast. Vex looked up from his console with an expression of disbelief. Ambassador, I'm picking up drive signatures consistent with human military vessels. But according to my calculations, they shouldn't arrive for another 6 hours. Kethra accessed the tactical display, studying the sensor readings that Vex was feeding to the main screen. What she saw defied everything she knew about interstellar travel. The human ships weren't just moving faster than their projected speed. They were moving faster than should have been physically possible without tearing themselves apart. Pilot Second, what's the maximum safe velocity for a Dreadnought-class vessel during system approach? Standard safety protocols limit approach velocity to 0.75 light speed for vessels of that mass, Ambassador. Beyond that, the gravitational stresses and the risk of collision with system debris become too dangerous. Kethra studied the readings again. The human vessels were approaching at 0.92 light speed, well beyond the safe operational limit for any known starship design. Either the humans had developed technology that completely revolutionized space travel, or they were willing to risk their entire fleet to respond to a distress call from aliens they had never met, given what she knew about humans. Both possibilities seemed equally likely. The transmission from Captain Zix-9 came through again, and this time his voice carried a note of hope that hadn't been there before. Unknown vessels approaching Epsilon 7. This is Captain Zix-9 of the Merchant Transport Prosperity's Dream. We are still under siege by Korthek raids. Our shields are at 15% and falling. Are you responding to our distress call? The response came not from Admiral Chun, but from another human voice, younger, but carrying the same edge of controlled violence. Captain Zix-9, this is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the 10 Vengeance. We are responding to your distress call. Be advised, we are beginning combat operations immediately. Keep your ship clear of the engagement zone and maintain emergency power to your engines. You're going to want to be ready to move fast when we give the word. Kethra watched as the tactical display updated with new information. The 14 human ships had spread out into an attack formation that she didn't recognize from any standard military doctrine. Instead of approaching in the traditional battle line or protective formation, they had arranged themselves in what appeared to be a T. The docking bay of the 10 Retribution was unlike anything Ambassador Kethra had ever seen aboard a military vessel. Where most warships prioritized efficiency over comfort, the human dreadnought somehow managed to incorporate both. The bulkheads were lined with what appeared to be actual wood paneling, and the deck plates had been treated with a non-slip coating that felt almost organic under her feet. But it was the crew that truly caught her attention. Every human she passed moved with the fluid efficiency of a trained warrior, but their interactions with each other spoke of something deeper than mere military discipline. These beings genuinely cared about one another's welfare, and it showed in every gesture and expression. Admiral Chun met them at the airlock personally, flanked by 2 officers whose bearing suggested they were accustomed to making life-and-death decisions without hesitation. The Admiral himself was even more imposing in person, standing nearly a full head taller than Kethra despite her species' naturally elongated frame. Ambassador Kethra, welcome aboard the Retribution. I'd like you to meet Commander Sarah Mitchell, my tactical officer, and Dr. James Harrison, our chief medical officer. Kethra performed the traditional Valdorian greeting gesture, touching all 4 hands to her chest before extending them toward her hosts. Admiral Chung, the honor is mine. I must confess I've never been aboard a human vessel before. Your reputation tends to discourage casual visits. Something that might have been amusement crossed the Admiral's face. Yes, I've heard that our military effectiveness tends to make other species nervous. That's actually one of the things I wanted to discuss with you. They walked through corridors that hummed with barely contained power, past compartments where Kethra could glimpse advanced technology that she didn't recognize. The ship felt alive in a way that was both fascinating and slightly unsettling. Admiral, if you don't mind my asking, how many crew members does this vessel carry? 1,500 combat personnel, plus another 300 specialists and support staff. The Retribution is designed to operate independently for extended periods while maintaining full combat effectiveness, Commander Mitchell added. What most species don't understand about human military doctrine is that we don't build ships to fight battles. We build them to win wars. Every system aboard this vessel is designed with one goal in mind: the complete neutralization of any threat to human interests or allied civilian populations. They entered what was clearly the Admiral's ready room, a space that managed to feel both professional and oddly personal. The walls were lined with books, actual paper books that must have been incredibly valuable in space. A large display screen dominated one wall, currently showing tactical readouts from the recent engagement. Please, have a seat. Admiral Chun gestured to a conference table that could accommodate a dozen beings. Can we offer you refreshments? I understand Valdorian physiology requires a specific mineral content in your beverages. Kethra was surprised that the humans had bothered to research such details. Most species she dealt with diplomatically made little effort to accommodate her people's biological needs. Thank you, that's very considerate. Admiral, I have to admit that this conversation feels somewhat surreal after what I witnessed today. Your fleet eliminated a force that has terrorized this sector for months, and you did it with such efficiency that it almost seemed routine. Dr. Harrison spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to dealing with crisis situations. Ambassador, I think that's exactly the problem. To us, it was routine. We've been conducting similar operations for so long that we sometimes forget how they appear to outside observers. What Dr. Harrison means, Admiral Chun continued, is that we need to do a better job of explaining our military philosophy to the galactic community. Too many species see our effectiveness as a threat rather than as protection. Kethra accepted the mineral-rich beverage that a human crew member brought her, noting that it had been prepared exactly to her species' specifications. Admiral, with respect, it's difficult not to see your capabilities as a potential threat. Your fleet just demonstrated technological and tactical superiority that makes conventional defense strategies obsolete. From a diplomatic perspective, that's terrifying. Commander Mitchell leaned forward, her expression serious. Ambassador, let me ask you a question. How many civilian transports has your government lost to piracy in the past year? According to our shipping authority, we've documented 47 attacks resulting in the loss of 12 vessels and over 800 civilian lives. And how many retaliatory operations has the Valdorian military conducted against the groups responsible? Kethra felt uncomfortable under the human's direct gaze. Our military doctrine emphasizes defensive operations and diplomatic solutions. We prefer to negotiate safe passage agreements rather than engage in direct confrontation. In other words, Dr. Harrison said gently, you've been paying pirates to leave you alone while they continue to prey on others. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Kethra wanted to deny it, but the humans were absolutely correct. The Valdorian government, like most galactic powers, had found it easier to accommodate piracy than to eliminate it. Admiral Chun activated the wall display, showing a tactical map of the entire sector. Ambassador, this is what piracy activity looked like 6 months ago when we began our anti-piracy operations. The display showed hundreds of red indicators spread throughout the region. And this is what it looks like today. The second display showed fewer than 20 red indicators, all concentrated in remote systems far from major shipping lanes. We didn't achieve this by negotiating with pirates or by paying them to attack someone else's ships. We achieved it by hunting them down and eliminating them as operational threats. Every single one. Kethra studied the displays with growing amazement. You've essentially eliminated organized piracy from an area that covers 12 star systems and 3 major trade routes. How is that possible with only 14 ships? Commander Mitchell smiled, and for the first time, Kethra saw warmth in the expression. Ambassador, you're still thinking in terms of conventional military doctrine. You're assuming we fight one engagement at a time, in one location at a time? The display shifted to show the human fleet's operational pattern over the past 6 months. Instead of moving as a single unit, the ships had been operating in small groups, coordinating their activities across multiple star systems simultaneously. Human naval doctrine is based on network operations, Admiral Chun explained. Each ship in our fleet is capable of independent operation, but they're also part of an integrated network that shares targeting data, tactical analysis, and strategic coordination in real time. Dr. Harrison added, what you witnessed today wasn't 14 ships fighting 12. It was 14 nodes of a single intelligence system engaging 12 separate targets. Every shot fired was calculated not just for maximum effectiveness, but for optimal coordination with the other 13 units in the network. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just developed superior technology. They had developed a completely new approach to military operations that treated entire fleets as single organisms. Admiral, this level of coordination requires computational power and communication technology, far beyond anything the galactic community has seen before. Are you willing to share these advances with allied species? The three humans exchanged glances before Admiral Trun responded. Ambassador, that's a more complex question than you might realize. Our technology isn't just about computational power. It's about the integration of biological and artificial intelligence in ways that other species might find uncomfortable. What do you mean? Commander Mitchell touched a control panel, and the room's lighting dimmed slightly. Ambassador, every human serving in the Expeditionary Navy has undergone neural enhancement procedures that allow them to interface directly with their ship's tactical systems. We don't just operate our technology, we become part of it. Kethra felt her secondary heart skip a beat. You're talking about cybernetic integration. Most galactic species consider that a violation of biological integrity. And that's exactly why our military effectiveness seems so impossible to other species, Dr. Harrison said. You're trying to fight tomorrow's wars with yesterday's limitations. You're treating your crews and your technology as separate entities that have to work together. We've eliminated the separation entirely. The Admiral reactivated the main display, showing detailed recordings from the engagement with the Korthik Syndicate. When Commander Mitchell engaged multiple targets simultaneously, she wasn't relying on external targeting computers. She was processing targeting solutions through her enhanced neural systems while her implanted interfaces managed fire control, navigation, and tactical analysis simultaneously. Every crew member on every ship in our fleet operates at this level of integration. When we engage an enemy force, we're not just bringing superior firepower to bear. We're bringing superior intelligence, superior coordination, and superior decision-making speed. Kethra watched the recordings with new understanding. The human ships hadn't just been faster and more accurate than their opponents. They had been thinking faster. The Korthik raiders had been